В заключение хочу подчеркнуть, мы не ведем войну с Украиной и украинским народом, а проводим специальную военную операцию против националистов и для защиты жителей Донбасса, денацификации и демилитаризации. Эти задачи будут достаточно скоро выполнены, и украинский народ получит возможность вновь самостоятельно решать свою судьбу, живя в этом мире, при этом в мире, добрососедстве и сотрудничестве со всеми соседями. Сейчас я возобновляю свои функции председателя Совета Безопасности и предоставляю слово представителю Соединенных Штатов для дополнительного заявления.
Colleagues, I asked to take the floor for a different reason, and so I'm not going to respond to the atrocious lies and propaganda and misinformation that you just heard from our Russian colleague. What I asked to take the floor for was to recall the names of some of our colleagues who were not named earlier due to the rapidly moving response to these events in Ukraine. Some of them were left off, who were sponsors of the resolution, and I'd just like to highlight their names because we so appreciate what they have done. Barbados, Croatia, Estonia, the Gambia, Grenada, Haiti, Jamaica, Japan, Kiribati, Lesotho, Marshall Islands, Monaco, North Macedonia, Palau, Papua New Guinea, and Suriname. I want to thank you and all of you for your support. We will continue to all speak in one voice in the days ahead to address the atrocious situation that we see happening every day on the ground, despite what we've heard from our Russian colleagues. I now thank you.
Спасибо. Сейчас я предоставляю слово представителю Украины.
Distinguished members of the Security Council, I will not dignify the Russian diabolical script that is rather a letter of application for an upscale seat in the hell by commenting it. I would like to use this opportunity to thank the parents of every ambassador here, to thank the people of the democratic nations who put these ambassadors in their seats, to tell the children of those ambassadors that they should be proud of their parents, that they have voted in favor of the resolution. I thank my good friend Nicolas from France, Rolando from Brazil, my good friend Hajar from Albania, Linda, Barbara, Mona, my good friend from Mexico, Martin from Kenya, Ireland, Ghana, Gabon. I thank dozens and dozens of co-sponsors who would vote in favor of the resolution should they have a chance to vote, but they will have this chance in days to come. The draft recalls the obligation of all states under Article 2 of the UN Charter to refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The draft called on Russia to stop its offensive against Ukraine. And the memories are very fresh. The Security Council was discussing the ways to prevent the war quite recently in this very chamber. And at the very same moment, deadly airstrikes were dropped on civilian heads across my country. And the Russian troops crossed the Ukrainian border from the territory of Russia. The territory of Belarus was used for missile attacks, and the troops were marching from the occupied parts of the Ukraine's Donbass and Crimea. Last night was the most horrific for Kiev since, just imagine, 1941, when it was attacked by Nazis. Last night was attacked by someone who pretends they are fighting with neo-Nazism. Therefore, I'm not surprised that Russia voted against. Russia is keen on continuing its Nazi-style course of action. The Kremlin regime should not be called Russian regime. The Kremlin regime should be called Russist regime. A couple of hours ago, my president said, and I quote, "Tonight, the enemy will use all the forces at their disposal to break our resistance, vile, cruel, and inhuman. Tonight, they will storm. We must all understand what awaits us. We have to persevere tonight. The fate of Ukraine is being decided right now," end of quote. We just heard something that the Russian ambassador wanted to present as assurances from himself and from his leadership that it's all provocation. And that he urged us not to yield to provocations. Do you remember how many times he said that, and his deputies said in this very room that there will be no invasion, no attacks? Do you remember how during the previous session he was walking out of the chamber, trying to call someone, not knowing what was going on? How we can trust you? How we can trust your assurance? You have no idea what is on the mind of your president. Your words have less value than a hole in the New York pretzel. The Russian Federation that occupied by treachery the seat of the Security Council member in 1991 violates daily not only the charter but also the provisional rules of procedure of this council. Because if Russia did not violate the provisional rules, then Mr. Nebenzia had to follow Article Rule 20. Let me quote. I begin the quote. "For the proper fulfillment of the responsibilities of the presidency, he should not preside over the council during the consideration of a particular question with which the member he represents," that's the Russian Federation, "is directly connected. He," the rule reads, "shall indicate his decision to the council not to preside." So since the council is not ruled by the current presidency by rules, I will be probably also unruly. And I will ask all of you to dedicate a moment of complete silence to pray or to meditate if you do not believe in God, for peace, to pray for souls of those who has been already killed, for souls of those who may be killed. And I invite the Russian ambassador to pray for salvation. Please, ladies and gentlemen, let us spend a moment in a complete silence.
Прошу прощения, прежде чем мы перейдем к минуте молчания, я хочу включить в этот список тех людей, которые погибли за все эти годы на Донбассе. Они тоже заслуживают того, чтобы помянуть их. Любая человеческая жизнь драгоценна. Не надо забывать о них тоже.
I do not excuse your rattle, but let's, ladies and gentlemen, spend a moment in complete silence. Thank you. I thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let me continue with my statement. I'm saddened, however, that there is a small handful of members that seem to be still tolerating the war. Any complex historical context could not be used to justify what is going on. And I may say to some, it is exactly the safety of your nationals right now in Ukraine that you should be the first to vote to stop the war, to save your nationals in Ukraine, and not to think about whether you should or should not vote because of the safety of your nationals. Nothing could justify missile shellings of kindergarten and an orphanage, hospitals that happened today. And in fact, one of my relatives got a stroke a couple of days ago, and the person cannot be evacuated even to the shelter because the person is not movable. So the person is in the hospital in the city of Kyiv. These attacks are war crimes and violations of the Rome Statute, whether you party to it or not. We are collecting these and other facts and will immediately send them to The Hague. And responsibility is inevitable. Nothing could justify today's deliberate shelling by a Russian warship of a Moldovan flagged chemical tanker with the Russian crew. Imagine. Or a Panamanian flag cargo ship near Odessa port in the Black Sea. It is a flagrant violation of international law of the sea. Is it a time to discuss historical reflections against the backdrop of the alarming situation in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, seized by the Russian armed groups? They detain the staff of the nuclear power plant, not allowing them to rotate as required by technical safety rules. Another matter of alarm that the control levels of gamma radiation, those rates in the exclusion zone, have already been exceeded because of the damage of the topsoil due to the movement of a large number of heavy military equipment, including tanks. And as a result, there is contamination by radioactive dust. Dear Security Council members, as of previous night, midnight, almost 140 persons were killed on the Ukrainian side and 316 persons wounded during, that was the first day of the Russian invasion. Many objects of civilian infrastructure were ruined. To stop the advance of the Russian tanks, a young gentleman, a hero, blew himself on a bridge. He killed himself to destroy the bridge, not to let the Russian tanks to go ahead. But the destruction takes place not only in cities. 80% of infrastructure of the small town of Shestya, located on the government-controlled part of Donbass, have been completely destroyed, according to the local administration. Occasionally, the name of the town is translated as happiness. That's actually the name of the town. Счастье, happiness. What a grotesque irony. It speaks volumes what kind of happiness the Russian Federation is bringing to Donbass, to Ukraine, to other nations. Sooner or later, if we continue to allow Russia to go ahead with its diabolical plan. And rest assured, Ambassador, there will be no hospitality to your troops on our territory. Ukraine has been executing its right for self-defense according to the Article 51. It's not the Russia that executes. Your perverse reading of the Charter is so sick that it's impossible to interpret. Calling occupational troops peacekeepers, claiming the right of self-defense, lunacy. The Russian troops are suffering heavy losses. Aircraft, helicopters, tanks, trucks, and most importantly, personnel. You can stop the vote in this chamber. But what may stop the war is unfortunately the bodies and thousands of bodies of Russian soldiers that will be delivered to their mothers in Russia, whether you like it or not, because we have to defend our territories, we have to defend ourselves on our territory. Thousands of Ukrainians have already joined the Ukrainian army or territorial defense forces. And the resolve and dedication of civilians joining the territorial defense forces is the best proof that we will not surrender, even if you succeed to temporarily occupy additional chunks of our territory. Ukraine has broken diplomatic relations with Russia, something that had to be done 8 years ago. We call on our partners to follow our example, or to find other ways to severe relationships, diplomatic relationships with Russia. We call on international organizations to ban or suspend the Russia's membership. The latter has happened today, in fact, as the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe, by overwhelming majority, I mean, it's almost like consensus, adopted the decision to suspend the Russian Federation from its rights of representation in the Committee of Ministers and in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. In the first place, you shouldn't have been invited to the Council of Europe. You were invited to the Council of Europe, this temple of human rights, in the middle of the Chechen War. In the very middle of the Chechen War, even before the Khasev-Yurt agreements. For hypocritical political reasons, the Europeans then were of the opinion that it's better to invite you, and you were invited in the middle of the war, killing thousands and thousands of your own citizens in Chechnya. We count upon the proper reaction by the international community to medieval atrocities by Russia in Ukraine. For today, a number of countries have already imposed sanctions on Russia, and the burden must be heavy. And if you say that sanctions is nothing, but I'm sure that the bodies of killed soldiers of Russia is not nothing, even if you are completely diabolical. We are sincerely grateful to the UN for its prompt decision to support the humanitarian response in Ukraine, as well as we highly commend the UN efforts to encourage major humanitarian donors to make additional funding available. I thank the Secretary General for his statement to this effect. And I have a plea. Stop harassing the Secretary General. Stop attacking him. Show respect to the institution. Stop wiping your feet of the Secretary General, who is a very nice person and a dedicated supporter of the UN Charter. We remain open for negotiations, but don't put words in our mouths. Don't manipulate with our statements about negotiations. We are sick of your interpretations. Speak on your own behalf. Do not speak on our behalf. This was stated by the President of Ukraine, that we are open to negotiations on a permanent basis, and we have been saying that all along. It is you who killed Normandy 4. It is you who killed the Minsk agreements. All that gibberish about who said what and when in Normandy 4 by no means can justify the offensive. By no means can justify thousands and thousands of your troops on our territory. Your today's call of your president to the Ukrainian army to remove the government of Ukraine? Are you crazy? Show respect for the core principles enshrined in the UN Charter. Sovereign equality, non-use of force or threat of force against territorial integrity and political independence. In my opening remarks, I said that parents of ambassadors here, all ambassadors but you, are proud of their children. And children of the ambassadors are proud of their parents. It's so painful to think what your family think about you when you lie every day. The Russian people deserve peace, democracy. The Russian people deserve liberty, and they will have it. If not tomorrow, because tomorrow is not possible, then probably in near future. Thank you.
Список ораторов исчерпан, но прежде чем мы завершим заседание, я хочу прокомментировать только одну вещь и успокоить членов Совета. Я многое мог бы прокомментировать выступление постпреда Украины. Я оставлю на его совести то хамство, которое он позволяет себе, выступая, и не буду говорить об этом. Это дело его совести. Но я хочу сказать одну вещь. Вчера это сообщение Минобороны России. Вчера, 24 февраля, подразделениями воздушно-десантных войск России взята под полный контроль территория в районе Чернобыльской атомной электростанции. С военнослужащими отдельного батальона охраны атомной электростанции Украины достигнута договоренность о совместном обеспечении безопасности энергоблоков и саркофага Чернобыльской атомной электростанции. Мы не хотим, чтобы в Украине появилась грязная бомба. Представитель Минобороны отметил, что персонал станции продолжает обслуживать ее в штатном режиме и отслеживает радиоактивную обстановку. Радиоактивный фон в районе атомной электростанции в норме. А вот сообщение из Вены. Уровень радиации на Чернобыльской атомной электростанции низкий и угрозы для населения отсутствуют. Об этом заявил в пятницу генеральный директор Международного агентства по атомной энергии Рафаэль Гросси. Список ораторов исчерпан, заседание закрывается.
You will lead the coordination of all our efforts, including our humanitarian response on both sides of the contact line. All concerned in this conflict must respect international humanitarian law and guarantee the safety and freedom of movements of UN staff and other humanitarians. Especially in a moment like this, it is important to remember that the UN is not just the chamber behind me. It is tens of thousands of women and men around the world, feeding the hungry, vaccinating children, promoting development, protecting civilians in peacekeeping operations, mediating conflicts, supporting refugees and migrants, advancing human rights, standing, delivering, extending a lifeline of hope. The United Nations Charter has been challenged in the past, but it has stood firm on the side of peace, security, development, justice, international law, and human rights. Time after time, when the international community has rallied together in solidarity, those values have prevailed. They will prevail independently of what happened today. We must do everything in our power so that they prevail in Ukraine, but they prevail for all humanity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary General, are you concerned about
Good evening. We stand here in full solidarity with the people of Ukraine. And we stand here to condemn and reject the Russian military aggression against them. This is an invasion of a member of the United Nations. It is not just a matter for Ukraine, nor is it just a matter for Europe. It's an attack against the fundamental principles of this organization. As stated by the Secretary General, Russia's military offensive is a repudiation of the principles of the UN Charter. It must stop. We deeply regret the use of the veto by Russia this evening to block the resolution that was presented today. This has prevented the UN Security Council from fulfilling its role to maintain international peace and security, and it is another proof of Russia's isolation and blatant disrespect for the reaction of the world. The resolution was supported by all member states of the European Union and many partners from around the world. Together with Ukraine, we will now work for the General Assembly to demand an immediate withdrawal of Russian forces from Ukraine. The European Union has approved sanctions and other measures, including against the Russian leadership, that will have severe consequences for Russia, and we've done it together with our partners and allies. We deplore the tragic loss of life and human suffering caused by the Russian aggression, and the EU and its member states are deploying immense efforts to help the courageous people of Ukraine. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Felice.
Good evening, and thank you for staying here this evening. I will now read a joint statement on behalf of approximately 43, on behalf of dozens of allies and partners gathered here with me today. This afternoon, the Security Council voted on a resolution to hold Russia accountable for its aggression against Ukraine, to protect civilians, including children, and call for the facilitation of rapid, safe, and unhindered humanitarian assistance to those in need. The resolution was vital and it was straightforward. Fundamentally, it was about whether the countries on the Security Council charged with maintaining international peace and security believe in upholding the UN Charter. The UN Charter was written with the express purpose of preventing a war like the one President Putin just started. The war has brought, in just its first days, devastating losses of life, and Russia alone is accountable. President Putin chose to violate Ukraine's sovereignty. President Putin chose to violate international law, and President Putin chose to violate the UN Charter. President Putin chose to drop bombs on Kyiv, to force families to stuff their lives into backpacks and shelter in subway stations. President Putin is the aggressor here. There is no middle ground. We believe we have a particular responsibility to stand up to the violations of the UN Charter because Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council who is culpable. Those of us standing here today continue to believe in the Security Council's solemn duty and highest purpose to prevent conflict and avert the scourge of war. Russia has abused its power today to veto our strong resolution, but Russia cannot veto our words. And as I said in the council, Russia cannot veto the Ukrainian people. Russia cannot veto their own people protesting this war in the streets, and Russia cannot veto the UN Charter. Russia cannot and will not veto accountability. We thank the member states who signed as co-sponsors of this resolution for standing with Ukraine and for the UN Charter today. We will be taking this matter to the General Assembly, where the Russian veto does not apply, and the nations of the world will continue to hold Russia accountable. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our colleagues. Thank you.
Good afternoon, good evening rather, Secretary General will make